Hello guys, today
magician,
நம்ம வந்து
Heimdall begins.
ரெக்கார்ட் ஆஃப் ராக்னராக் பார்க்க போகிறோம். இது ஒரு ரியாக்ஷன் வீடியோ தான். அதுக்கப்புறம் நான் ஏன் அப்லோட் பண்ணேன்னா ஒரு ஃபேமிலி பிஸ்னஸ் வந்துச்சு, அதனால நான் கொஞ்சம் நேரமாக அப்லோட் பண்ணல, சாரி கைஸ். ஓகே, இப்போ நம்ம ரியாக்ட் பண்ணுறதா போகலாம்.
But Tesla approaches Beelzebub
அதுக்கப்புறம் நான் பியல்சபப் vs டெஸ்லான்னு காமிக்க போகிறேன்.
and tells him their battle will be legendary. But he thinks their fight will be boring and notes that things won't end well for Tesla, who explains that he won't let the gods win Ragnarok since he wants
By the way, all credits go to recap kun.
humanity to keep inventing. Beelzebub suddenly shatters the ground, destroying the pillar in front of him, and Heimdall thinks he used magic. But Tesla notes that it was science, and the humans don't understand what he means, so the inventor Galileo explains that Beelzebub used vibration to split the ground. Hermes shows Ares how vibrating sound waves can destroy glass, and he explains that it can even make a sharp blade, which Beelzebub uses to cut Tesla's armor. Hermes knows that super vibration is Beelzebub's secret, and he notes that it's impossible to counter, telling Ares his muscles would shatter if it touches him. Tesla is impressed by Beelzebub's ability, and notes that it would have split him in half if he didn't jump away, so Gaul is worried that he might lose. But Hilda is confident that he'll win the match, since his armor was created by the greatest minds in history, and it's powered by Gondal's life force. Tesla charges in, and Beelzebub jumps away to avoid his attacks, as he shatters the ground with his strength. The scientist Thomas Edison reveals that he helped Tesla create the suit, and he boasts about its power, but the other inventors know that he always takes credit for Tesla's work. The humans are impressed by his strength, but he knows that his power is useless if he can't hit Beelzebub, so he charges up his suit and rushes forward with incredible speed. He hits Beelzebub with a burst of energy, which causes a massive explosion, but Beelzebub blocks it with his barrier. He tells Tesla he's getting bored, so he wants to end the fight quickly, and Tesla uses his electric fists to attack Beelzebub's barrier. But he realizes that its vibration is increasing as it suddenly transforms and smashes him to the ground. He manages to survive the attack, but Beelzebub tells him he's weak, and Gaul wonders why his staff is OP, so Hilda reveals that it's a divine treasure, which amplifies his powers. She notes that it creates a barrier when held with his left hand.
Sorry for pausing. எங்க ஸ்டாஃப்ல ஒரு ஸ்கல்லை தூக்கி போட்டீங்க.
But when he uses his right hand to wield
என்னங்க இந்த ஈமோ கேரக்டர் வளைஞ்சிருக்க,
it becomes a sword sharp enough to cut anything. Beelzebub tells Tesla he'll never defeat him, but he uses his suit to create a giant cage of light, and he suddenly starts floating, as he notes that he's the god while they're inside it. The humans think he's using magic, but Edison explains that it isn't the case, and notes that it's still science. We learn that Tesla worked on an anti-gravity system before his death, but he couldn't create it, since Earth didn't have the materials he needed. But since Gondal volunteered to become his suit, he finally has everything he needs to make it work. He rushes in with a lightning-fast attack, so Beelzebub tries to block it, but he gets caught in an explosion and ends up being injured. Hermes realizes that Tesla can reach his top speed in an instant, so it's difficult to predict his movements, and he charges at Beelzebub again. So he prepares to defend himself, but Tesla instantly changes his direction, and Beelzebub struggles to keep up with him. He tries to block with his barrier, but Tesla still manages to hit him, since his defense vibrations weren't fully deployed. Tesla rushes in again, but Beelzebub almost hits him and prepares to stab him with his staff, but Tesla dashes away. He moves around Beelzebub and counters with a spinning attack, which shatters his barrier, and Tesla hovers around the arena. Heimdall thinks he's doing it to taunt Beelzebub, who manages to dodge his attack, and he prepares to counter, but Tesla suddenly hits him with his electric fist. Gaul starts to celebrate, but she realizes that Beelzebub was able to block it, and he tells Tesla he already knows his tricks, so his attacks won't work on him. But Tesla charges up his suit, as he notes that the gods are about to witness the true power of science, and he suddenly disappears. We learn that after Tesla's death, the US government conducted an experiment based on his research, and it involved a destroyer equipped with Tesla coils. The crew was informed that the goal was to make the ship invisible, but as they activated the switch, they were suddenly surrounded by electricity and vanished without a trace. It reappeared near the coast of Virginia, which was 363 kilometers away, and the members of the US Navy realized that the real experiment was teleportation. But the experiment wasn't a total success, since many of the crew members died, and the survivors suffered emotional damage, so the US Navy decided to bury the research. Back in the present, Tesla appears behind Beelzebub and sends him flying, and everyone realizes that he used teleportation. But Beelzebub knows that he needs to charge up to use it, since if he immediately followed up with his teleportation, he could have already ended the fight. Beelzebub can also tell that he can only teleport to certain spots, since Tesla used his fancy movements to lure him to the place where he can teleport, and he knows that there's a limit to the number of times he can use it. Tesla admits that he's right, revealing that he can only use it inside the cage, and he notes that he needs to charge up the air to create spots where he can use it. He adds that it destroys a Tesla coil whenever he uses it, so he can only teleport 2 more times, but Hilda thinks Gondel will break if that happens, and he'll die since his soul is bound to his suit. Beelzebub wonders why he's telling him his weakness, so he explains that it's because scientists shouldn't withhold knowledge, and Beelzebub finds him amusing. He gets back on his feet, but he suddenly coughs up blood, so Hermes realizes that he's severely injured. He recalls the moment when he went to Hades' castle, and he challenged Hades to fight him, but he knew that Beelzebub was in no condition to fight, since he had been injured fighting the monsters in his castle. Beelzebub admits that he wants Hades to kill him, so he agrees to take him on, but Beelzebub is no match for him, and he gets blown away. He tells Hades to finish him off, and shows him the mark Lilith gave him, explaining that he can't take his own life because of it. He thinks Lilith cursed him since she wanted him to suffer, but Hades believes that it's not the case, and notes that she gave Beelzebub a prayer, because she wanted him to continue living. Hades tells him to reconsider his actions, and notes that he'll grant Beelzebub's wish if he returns in prime condition, but he wonders why Lilith doesn't want him to die. After that, Beelzebub returns to Hades, and notes that he still thinks he deserves to die, but he has decided to continue living, so that he can suffer and meet the worst end imaginable. He thinks it's the only way to atone for killing the people he loves, and Hades gives him his staff, explaining that he always wanted to give it to him, since he thinks it's perfect for him. He notes that he'll watch Beelzebub suffer and meet his end, but he wonders why Hades is so concerned about him, so he explains that it's because Beelzebub reminds him of his brothers. We return to the present, as Beelzebub notes that he has changed thanks to Hades, and he wants to slaughter all humans to avenge him. A dark energy surrounds his staff, as he holds it with both hands, and Zeus realizes that he's about to use his chaos technique, which is so powerful that it was banned in the underworld. Tesla tries to attack him first, but he endures it, and covers the arena with a giant ball of darkness, which destroys everything in the area. Everyone's amazed by its power, and they realize that Tesla survived the attack, but Gaul becomes worried seeing his condition. Adamas notices that Beelzebub is also in terrible shape, since his technique tore his own body to shreds, and Zeus thinks he made a mistake by using it without finishing Tesla. The scientists realize that Tesla sacrificed one of his coils to survive, and we learn that he used it to punch the dark ball with his full power, but it still couldn't save him from the chaos technique. Beelzebub tells Tesla he's about to meet his end, but he's determined to continue fighting, and he notes that humanity will go on forever. In a flashback, we see Tesla talking to his brother Dane, who was known in their village as a genius inventor, and he reveals that he's working on a windmill. He explains that he accepted the job since he wants to make people happy, but he's worried that his design won't work, and he notes that he doesn't want to disappoint everyone. But Tesla tells him there's no shame in failing, since it leads to discoveries, and he notes that it's what drives humanity's progress. We learn that he always looked up to Dane, since he built his inventions with all his heart, but one stormy evening, Dane leaves their house to check on the windmill. But he doesn't return, so Tesla rushes to look for Dane, and realizes that he was struck by lightning. The entire village mourns Dane's death, and the village chief blames himself for what happened, since Dane wouldn't have died if he hadn't told him to build the windmill. But Tesla tells the chief not to cry, and notes that Dane isn't dead, since he still lives in him. Tesla finishes the windmill using Dane's blueprint, but the villagers realize it isn't working, so they think the design was flawed. The villagers forget about Dane, and Tesla shuts himself away, but after 6 years, he finally manages to fix the windmill. So the villagers remember Dane, and Tesla notes that he didn't change the design, but it took him 6 years to figure it out. He realizes that the memory of Dane will live on as long as he continues inventing, so he dedicates his life to science and continues his research even after his death. Back in the present, Tesla gets back up, and everyone cheers for him as he notes that humanity will never die. He charges up his suit to create the cage again and starts moving with ridiculous speed, but Beelzebub still manages to keep up with him and pushes him back. He realizes that he can't move freely since the arena is full of debris, but he knows that Beelzebub's vibration attacks are starting to take a toll on his body. So he thinks the fight is almost over, but Beelzebub charges in and unleashes a barrage of attacks. Lilith's mark activates, since he seems to be throwing his life away, but he manages to control it with his willpower, and Tesla realizes that he can't dodge the attacks. His cage shatters as he gets hit, and his suit starts to fall apart, so the humans realize he's losing the fight. But he suddenly screams that the technique was incredible, and notes that he was impressed by the way Beelzebub used his ability. He notes that he has finally come up with a solution, so the humans realize that he hasn't given up yet, and they start cheering for him as he charges up his suit again. He charges at Beelzebub, who uses his barrier to defend himself, but Tesla starts pummeling it with a barrage of punches. Beelzebub struggles to defend himself, and Adamas knows that Tesla can't keep it up forever, but Zeus notes that Beelzebub's body is also about to give out. The humans cheer as Tesla continues his relentless assault, and Edison wants him to prove that their science can reach the gods, but he suddenly reaches his limit. He realizes that Beelzebub's chaos technique ruptured his internal organs, and he still refuses to let up, but Beelzebub parries his attack. The humans panic as Beelzebub prepares to finish him off, but Tesla reveals that it's the moment he was waiting for, and he suddenly goes on the attack, so Beelzebub puts up his barrier. But Tesla suddenly teleports his fist, and it appears behind Beelzebub, who realizes that he's about to be hit from both sides. But Beelzebub sacrifices his hand to block the right fist, and he barely manages to avoid Tesla's attack. His staff falls to the ground, but everyone realizes that he was able to stab Tesla, causing his suit to fall apart. He thinks he lost because Beelzebub outsmarted him, but he explains that he simply relied on his convictions, and admits that he could never outthink Tesla since he's smarter than him. Tesla coughs up blood, and as Beelzebub walks away, Tesla tells everyone to hold their heads high, because they will continue to evolve after the battle. His soul starts to crumble, but Gondel smiles as she joins him, and he tells the humans to keep growing and never give up. Heimdall announces that Beelzebub won the fight, but he thinks he would have lost if it weren't for Hades, since he was the one who convinced him to keep on living. After that, Hilda heads to the room where she honors the fallen heroes, and she starts crying for Tesla, but Buddha suddenly interrupts her and asks her why she's always crying when he sees her. He reveals that he was looking for her, since he wants to know about her ex Siegfried, who's currently imprisoned in Tadaris. Buddha wonders if Ragnarok has something to do with him, but she explains that it isn't the case, and notes that Siegfried isn't her ex. Meanwhile in Tadaris, we see two guards talking about how Beelzebub won round 8, and they note that the scores are now tied, but Siegfried asks them about it. They ask him which side he's rooting for, since they know that he's a half-breed, but he tells them it's a tough question to answer. One of them gets annoyed that he didn't give them a straight answer, but his companion reminds him that they aren't allowed to talk to him, so they immediately walk away. But Siegfried notes that he was able to get the information he wanted, since he knows that Hilda is doing well, but he hopes that she doesn't push herself too hard. We see Ares as he notes that he's stressed, since the scores are tied, and he doesn't like the god's representative for the next round. Zeus admits that he's annoying, but he can't deny his strength, and they see the god Apollo, who's enjoying himself with some girls. Ares can't believe he's relaxing at a time like this, but Apollo calls him his best friend, and invites him to join them in the pool. He tries to hit Apollo, but he misses and falls into the pool, and Apollo wonders what Zeus is doing there, so he notes that the next round of Ragnarok is about to begin. But Apollo didn't know that they were still fighting against the humans, so Zeus tells him about the current record, and mentions the gods that they have already lost. He thinks their deaths must have been magnificent, but Ares wonders why he isn't sad, so he explains that there's no reason to feel sadness, since they displayed their beauty by fighting with passion, and he decides to fight in the next round. Hilda and Gaul visit humanity's next representative, and they see Spartan soldiers working out, as Hilda notes that even death can't stop them from training. She greets their king Leonidas, and notes that she wants him to participate in the next round, but he tells her he isn't interested, since he only wanted to fight in the first or last round. But she thinks it's a shame, since she believes that he's the only one who can defeat Apollo, and he suddenly changes his mind, because he wants to fight the god that the Oracle of Delphi worshipped. He notes that he'll defeat Apollo for the Spartans, and the Valkyrie Kiru appears, as Hilda explains that they'll work together in the next match. But he reveals that he doesn't like working with people he doesn't trust, and tells her he doesn't like her. She notes that the feeling is mutual and attacks him, but it has no effect, and she tells him her abilities will be useful to him, so he decides to make an exception. Heimdall announces that the next round is about to begin, and he introduces Leonidas as humanity's representative, so the Spartans cheer for him as he walks into the arena. Heimdall introduces the god's representative, and a flash of light covers the arena, as Apollo makes his entrance. Heimdall begins the match, and Leonidas immediately charges at Apollo, who easily dodges his attacks. He tells Leonidas he's like a savage beast, but he manages to cut Apollo's hair, so his fans start to get worried, and Ares thinks he's underestimating the humans. Leonidas wants to make him pay for everything he's done, but Apollo doesn't know why Leonidas is angry at him, and tells him to kneel before him. Leonidas calls him an arrogant prick, which makes him angry, since Leonidas didn't use beautiful words to describe him, and Leonidas notes that he hates him more than anything in this world. In a flashback, the Persian king Xerxes led his 300,000 men to overthrow the Greek city-states, and we see a Spartan named Haggis, who's guarding the Elder Council. The elders discuss that they shouldn't go to war with the Persians, since it's the Carnea festival, and we learn that Apollo banned military actions during the event. So the elders think he'll punish them if they fight the Persians, but since Sparta is doomed if the Persians cross the peninsula. But the elders don't care, explaining that they can't defy the Oracle of Delphi, and they tell him there's no need to worry, since they can still defend their land after the festival. Haggis thinks the elders are ridiculous, but he doesn't dare to speak against them, since he knows that everyone believes in the Oracle. But Leonidas speaks up, and calls the elders a bunch of idiots, since they're putting everyone's lives on the line for Apollo. They remind him that he can't start a war without their approval, and we learn that during this time in history, the decision to wage war was left solely to the council. They scold him for mocking their patron god, but he smashes Apollo's statue, and tells them he's ready for divine retribution. They think he defied the gods since he's eager for battle, but he explains that he doesn't enjoy going to war, and notes that he just did it because it's time to fight. He tells them he's willing to fight alone if he has to, and he starts walking away, but Haggis suddenly abandons his post, because his spirit is pushing him to follow Leonidas. Leonidas prepares to head to battle alone, but his 300 Spartans follow him, and tell him they're ready to fight by his side. He warns them that they won't make it back alive, but Haggis tells him they're ready to die fighting, and they all march with him as he prepares to fight Xerxes. They see the Persian army, and realize that they're completely outnumbered, since the Persians have 300,000 men. But the Spartans aren't afraid of them, since they're fighting by Leonidas' side, and they follow him as he fights to the death. Haggis recalls everything that happened, and he notes that they got wiped out, but he never felt more alive in his entire life. He knows that their courage inspired all of Greece to drive back the Persians, so he thinks they lost the battle but won the war. Back in the present, Leonidas tells Apollo that the Spartans almost lost the war because of his oracles, and he transforms his shield into a spinning blade. He throws it at Apollo, who manages to catch it, but Leonidas pushes it forward, and it sends Apollo flying. He tells Apollo not to stand in front of a Spartan if he wants to live a long life, but he immediately recovers, so Leonidas continues to attack him. Gaul wonders why Apollo's hands are sparkling, so Hilda explains that it's because of his divine treasure, which is known as the thread of Artemis, and we learn that it can transform into anything. She knows that he used it to block the last attack, which explains why he was able to recover quickly, and he transforms it into a pair of gauntlets. Leonidas uses his shield to launch a barrage of attacks, but Apollo manages to dodge them, and Zeus notes that his footwork is amazing, since he's the god of boxing. He manages to get in close, and starts punching Leonidas, who struggles to keep up with his movements. But the Spartans think Apollo is a coward, since he isn't fighting Leonidas head-on, and they start taunting him, so he decides to change his tactic. He uses his threads to draw lines on both sides, and tells Leonidas their ring was too big, so he decided to make it smaller. Leonidas asks him what he's trying to pull, so he explains that he's giving the audience what they want by making the conditions more favorable for Leonidas, but still overpowering him in the end. The Spartans are angry since he's mocking them, and Ares thinks he's underestimating Leonidas, but Zeus notes that he's at his strongest since he always rises to meet any expectation. Apollo unleashes his ultimate battle mode, but Gaul worries that Gira might lose it since she's the proudest of the Valkyrie. She tells Leonidas to kill Apollo since he's mocking them, and Leonidas promises to make him bow before them, but Apollo notes that it will never happen. Leonidas' shield transforms again, and he tries to crush Apollo with it, but he manages to dodge the attack, and he uses his threads to stop Leonidas from moving. He charges up his fist and lands a solid hit, so Gaul thinks Leonidas is done for, but Hilda knows that it isn't over yet, since a Spartan's pride is so strong that they won't yield to the gods. Leonidas suddenly counters with his head, and he smashes Apollo to the ground, asking him what it's like to kneel before a human. He reminds Apollo not to stand before a Spartan, since he'll only look pathetic, but he gets back on his feet, and notes that Leonidas looks beautiful when he's fighting, since he puts all of his passion into it. The gods think he's pathetic, since he's acting like an arrogant fool, but Ares knows that it isn't true, since Apollo actually knows his place in Valhalla. In a flashback, we see a monster called the Python terrorizing the village of Delphi, after he was banished from Valhalla for his appearance. Ares' divine soldiers try to stop him, but he easily defeats them, and scares away the villagers in his path. But one day, Apollo appears before him and challenges him to a fight, so Python charges at him, but Apollo defeats him with a single hit. He refuses to admit defeat, and notes that he hasn't given up yet, but Apollo is happy to hear this, and tells him they can continue their fight the next day. Python spends the next few days trying to defeat Apollo, but he's still no match for him, and Apollo asks Python why he keeps challenging him. He explains that he lives a miserable life because of his appearance, and everyone hates him wherever he goes, so he can't lose to someone like Apollo, who was born with every advantage in the world. He tells Python he's beautiful, but he doesn't believe Apollo, since he knows that he looks hideous. So Apollo notes that his appearance doesn't matter, and explains that he's beautiful, since he can look deep into his soul and fight with passion. Apollo tells him they aren't so different, and we learn that he used to be a mediocre god, but he worked hard to develop his skills, until he became one of the 12 Olympians. He tells Python that those who are born beautiful live stagnant lives, since they take everything they have for granted. But the ones born with nothing know themselves better than anyone, so they're aware of their weakness, and continue to change since they take nothing for granted. He tells Python to take pride in his beauty, and he cries as he recalls how he's hurt people, but Apollo tells him it's okay, since he was just defending himself. Python notes that he won't lose to anyone, and Apollo tells him it's what makes him beautiful, so he decides to change his ways. He starts living with the villagers in Delphi, where he builds a temple for Apollo, and he writes down Apollo's motto, which is to always know oneself. We return to the present, as Leonidas tells Apollo he finds him annoying, but Apollo notes that his attack was beautiful, and he can tell that Leonidas' soul burns with passion. So he decides to fight him with everything he's got, and his threads suddenly disappear, but a statue of the goddess Artemis emerges from his shadow. It creates a giant bow for Apollo, who summons an arrow of light as he prepares to shoot, and he notes that he's about to use his supreme technique. Leonidas tells him to bring it on, but the arrow travels faster than the speed of light, and it pierces through his chest. Hermes notes that it's the fastest attack in Valhalla, and Zeus thinks Leonidas has lost, since even the gods can't block Apollo's arrows. Gira strengthens Leonidas' shield, and he tries to block the arrows, but Apollo overpowers him and continues to land his shots. Gira thinks they need to regroup, since they can't counter Apollo's arrows, but Leonidas launches an arrow at Leonidas' head, but he manages to send it back, and it pierces through Apollo's chest. Hermes wonders if Leonidas was able to see the arrow, explaining that his past experiences in battle shaped him as a warrior. Apollo struggles to get back on his feet, and Leonidas tells Apollo not to mock him, since he's the king of Sparta. But Apollo starts laughing, as he realizes that Leonidas' pride is what drives him to keep fighting, and he notes that he's starting to like him. Everyone notices that both of them are close to their limit, and Apollo wonders if Leonidas is fighting for the sake of humanity, but he explains that he's just doing it since it's his time to fight. He notes that humans don't get to choose how they are born, but they can decide how they want to live and die, and he mentions that he gathered the world's most selfish men to create a nation. His soldiers cheer for him as he transforms his shield into its ultimate form, which resembles the shield of the Spartans. Apollo thanks Leonidas for giving him a battle that was able to set his soul on fire, and he returns the statue, which twists the threads together to form a giant rope. He leans back on it as he prepares to launch himself like an arrow, and we learn that it's a move that he once used to destroy the walls of a city. Ares realizes that he's planning to break the shield head-on, and everyone becomes nervous as the strongest arrow of Valhalla prepares to clash with the greatest shield of humanity. Both fighters charge in, as Apollo transforms his hand into a blade, and he uses it to stab Leonidas' shield, but it ends up shattering. So everyone thinks it's all over for him, but Leonidas' shield also breaks, and Apollo manages to stab him. But Gira tells Leonidas to do it, so he grabs onto Apollo and smashes his face, but he endures the blow, and Leonidas' soul starts to shatter. The Spartans cry as they watch their king's final moment, and they tell him he's the coolest Spartan ever, so he's glad that his men respect him, telling them they're the strongest warriors in the world. Apollo hugs him before he disappears, and he notes that Leonidas and Giru are both beautiful, so they smile as they pass on. Heimdall announces Apollo as the winner, and his fans worry about the scars on his face, but he notes that he doesn't mind keeping them, since they will remind him of his battle with Leonidas. Python sees Apollo leaving the arena, but realizes that he's covered in wounds, and he suddenly collapses, so Python helps him get to the clinic. Chris mourns for Geru, but Kojiro tells her it was a battle to be proud of, and Isami notes that Leonidas died an honorable death, so everyone will remember him as a great warrior. The swordsman named Okita reveals that he's jealous, since he didn't have a death fit for a warrior, and Isami understands how he feels. Hilda picks humanity's next representative, but she doesn't know who to choose, since she knows that they can't afford to lose the next match. Okita committed an unforgivable sin, but Buddha knows that he only stole Odin's sword, and used it to slay his dragon. He thinks it isn't enough to put Siegfried into Daris, since only the worst criminals are supposed to be there, and he believes that Odin sent him there because he wanted to get rid of him. Buddha knows that Siegfried is Hilda's lover, and he thinks she started Ragnarok to save him along with humanity, but Odin doesn't want him to be released. Buddha admits that there are a lot of things he doesn't understand, so he asks Odin to tell him everything, but he suddenly becomes upset, and uses his divine treasure to smash the ground. He notes that anyone who sets foot in his domain will suffer his wrath, and Buddha prepares to take him on, but Beelzebub suddenly appears, as he reveals that he's interested in Buddha's theory. He clashes against Odin, and asks him about the long-cherished ambition that he mentioned in the past, thinking it has something to do with the revival of the primordial gods. But that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe.
Okay guys, bye bye. See you. Like and subscribe. Bye bye.